All right, so you just made it off the dock at your local wake park. That's awesome, but now what? A lot of times, first-time riders are really not ready for how aggressive corners can be and how counterintuitive the mechanics are. So even if you're an experienced boat wakeboarder, don't feel bad if you really got caught off guard by your first corner. The reality is that cable park corners are just really hard to manage. And it's tough for me to see because I think it's a barrier for a lot of beginners. Even if some beginners are making it around corners, they're maybe not doing it as smoothly as they could, and it wears them out faster than it should. So what I want to do here is break down some of the weird and counterintuitive dynamics that go into rounding cable park corners so that hopefully you can either make your first corner or improve the way you're making corners already so that you don't get tired so quickly. At this point, you've probably heard some version of how to round corners properly at a cable park. Like, you have an outside turn, and then when you hear a click, you turn inside, or maybe it's a left turn and then a right turn, or go through the buoys and then turn. There's a lot of different ways to explain this, but what I want to do here is break down a little bit of the physics that go into this so that you can understand the reasoning behind the advice you're given at cable parks. Alright, so I got a drone angle here, and the first thing I want to do is explain the reason for the turning buoys. You can see ours right here. At West Rock we only use one, most parks use two, but more on that later, that doesn't matter right now. What I had my rider do in this example was ride straight forward and just completely miss the turning buoy. Basically, I told him to try to follow the path of the cable exactly, and it's really interesting to see what happens when he does that. First, I'm going to extend the path that he's currently on, and what we're going to do is we're going to watch the amount of pull we have, but only on that line. So you can see he goes forward and he's just fine, but once the carrier rounds the pulley, almost all of his forward momentum is gone. So naturally, he gets a ton of slack in the line. Now, intuitively from this angle, you might think that the way for him to fix that would be to line himself up perfectly with the next straightaway. But that's actually not a good idea because just like how our virtual carrier from the last straightaway suddenly slowed down, our virtual carrier from the new straightaway suddenly speeds up. So if he were to be fully lined up with this straightaway, the handle would just get ripped out of his hands. So actually the best way to make this a smooth transition is to be perfectly balanced between this straightaway and this virtual straightaway. I'm going to call it the sweet spot. Basically, the way to keep tension in your rope is to get as close as you can to this sweet spot. Now, if you look in this example, my rider actually goes a little inside of the sweet spot. And actually, most turning buoys are going to land in a place that is just a little inside of that sweet spot. The reason for that is that when you round the corner, you can pull the rope in a little bit to basically shorten it. And when you shorten it, your sweet spot will actually move a little bit. And the reason that we go inside of the sweet spot rather than outside of it is that it's much easier to shorten the rope by pulling your arms in or leaning back than it is to extend the rope by letting your arms out. If you go outside of the sweet spot, it's really likely that you could get pulled over your board because the rope is trying to extend somehow. Now let's talk about that second turn. That's the inward turn, or the turn you do after you hear the pulley click. It's basically the speed control turn. Now, I'm no physics expert, but I know that some crazy things start happening when you have an object with momentum in one direction, and then you have a force that's applied to it at a 90-degree angle. I mean, that's the same set of physics that keeps the space station flying at thousands of miles an hour above the Earth. And the reason that's important is because that's the set of physics that'll be applied to you if you don't complete the second part of this maneuver. And I have a third example here to show that. In this example, my rider does a great job at making it out to the turning buoys. He made his outward turn and he's still got tension on his line. But what he does is he keeps carving in that direction. And if you look at the physics going on here, it should look familiar. And so naturally, he picks up a lot of speed and really gets whipped around the corner. And you've probably had this feeling before at the cable park where it feels like after rounding the corner, the cable suddenly weirdly speeds up. All that's happening is you're carving in the one singular direction and the cable has every opportunity to just sling you around. So basically to fix that, all you do is after you've passed the turning buoy, after your carrier rounds the pulley, you just have to turn your board to start following the path of the cable. This is where it's really helpful to think of the path of the cable as a road that you're driving on. Like, think about it. If you're driving your car on the road, you're going to want to turn your car to follow the road, or things are going to go bad. Here's what's tough about proper cable park cornering technique is that this proper line involves some really sharp turns, and you actually have to have pretty good edge control to be able to fully hit this line. I mean, think about it. When you carve out to hit the turning buoys, you have to make a 90-degree turn really quickly to be able to be lined up with the next straightaway. So the reality could be that you just don't quite have the carving strength yet to make a turn as sharp as you want to, though. If you were at West Rock, we'd probably send you back to the 2.0s to work on your carving a little bit, but if you don't have that luxury, I have a band-aid fix for you. So remember that sweet spot from earlier. In the end, the only things that really matter are that you cross the sweet spot to keep tension and align yourself with the next straightaway as quickly as you can. So what you can actually do is carve out to a point of the cable that's farther out than the turning buoys, but farther up too, so that you start your inward carve way sooner and allow yourself the luxury of really taking your time on that carve. Basically, all you have to do is start carving to align yourself with the next straightaway and run over the turning buoys on your way to it. Now, the reason that this isn't proper technique is that it costs you a lot more space on the straightaway. If you were to only use this technique, you'd have a really hard time hitting any features. So again, it's a band-aid fix, and ultimately, your goal is gonna wanna be to tighten that line up. But if you take this line at your local cable, my guess is that the turns will be a lot easier on your hands and wrists. So I hope this helped you understand the weird and counterintuitive technique that you need to be able to properly round a corner at a cable park. I hope you feel like you can take this information to any park in the world and use it to round the corners there. Believe it or not, you can actually get to a point where your technique is so good that you hardly feel the transition in the corners. So get out to your local cable and give these techniques a try. My guess is that with a little bit of practice and a little bit of finesse, you'll be rounding corners super smoothly in no time.